Everyday objects are meant to make life easier, but sometimes they turn deadly. From simple household items to common tools, the most harmless things can lead to tragic deaths. In this video, we'll look at 5 real stories of people who lost their lives in disturbing ways, killed by objects we use every day. On December 16, 2020, in Greensboro, North Carolina, the Huff family's morning started like any other. AJ and Jackie Huff were getting their 2 sons ready for the day. Michael, their older child, and 23-month-old Jonathan, lovingly called Nugget. Both parents worked in emergency medical care, Jackie as a physician assistant and AJ as a paramedic, so they were no strangers to medical crises. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to happen. That morning was hectic. The couple had only 20 minutes to get both kids out the door. Amid the rush, Jonathan, like any curious toddler, managed to slip away unnoticed. Within those few moments, he likely grabbed a button battery from a key finder remote left on a countertop. The back of the remote had come off, leaving the small battery exposed. No one saw him take it, and no one knew he had swallowed it. Jonathan spent the day at daycare acting like his usual self. He held his older brother's hand as they walked to class and showed no signs that anything was wrong. But by midday, teachers noticed something alarming. He had a nosebleed, and soon after he started vomiting blood. Paramedics were called and believed the bleeding was from the nosebleed irritating his throat. They advised Jackie and AJ to take him to a pediatrician for a closer look. When Jackie arrived, Jonathan seemed tired and pale, but his vital signs were stable. The pediatrician examined him and suspected a viral illness, possibly bronchiolitis, which could explain the nosebleed. The doctor recommended fluids, rest, and monitoring over the weekend. By the next day, Jonathan developed a fever. His parents took him back to the doctor, who reassured them it was likely a virus. His chest X-ray was clear, and the result of the COVID-19 test came back negative. The advice remained the same: keep him hydrated and let the illness run its course. The Huffs spent the weekend keeping a close watch on their son. On Saturday, Jonathan seemed to be improving. He watched his favorite show, Bubble Guppies, and even asked for some Doritos, which gave his parents hope that he was recovering. But by Sunday morning, everything took a devastating turn. Jonathan woke up with a high fever and suddenly started coughing violently. Then, he vomited bright red blood. AJ and Jackie, though trained in emergency care, were in shock. AJ immediately began performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, while Jackie gave rescue breaths. But when she pulled away, she saw blood pouring from his mouth. AJ continued chest compressions as they waited for help, but Jonathan's tiny heart was struggling. By the time paramedics arrived, he was unresponsive. They rushed him to Moses H. Cone Hospital while Jackie followed in a sheriff's car, desperately hoping for a miracle. When she arrived, she was met with the news no parent should ever hear. Doctors had tried everything, but Jonathan had lost too much blood. The damage was irreversible. He was gone. An autopsy later revealed the cause. A button battery had been lodged inside him for 4 days, slowly burning through his esophagus, intestines, and aorta. The battery's chemical reaction had caused severe internal injuries, leading to fatal bleeding. The battery had come from the key finder remote on their countertop, something so small, yet so deadly. The Huffs were devastated. They replayed every moment, wondering if they could have done something differently. The weight of their loss was unbearable. As parents who had spent their lives saving others, they never imagined losing their own child this way. At Jonathan's funeral, a procession of fire trucks and ambulances lined the streets, symbols of the life he loved and the community that rallied around his grieving family. But no amount of support could ease their pain. They had lost their little boy, and nothing could bring him back. Determined to prevent this from happening to other families, Jackie and AJ began raising awareness about the dangers of button batteries. They urged parents to secure devices containing these small batteries, store them out of reach, and tape battery compartments shut. After Jonathan's passing, Australia became the first country to enforce mandatory safety standards for products containing button batteries. While this was a step toward preventing similar tragedies, the Huffs knew that more needed to be done. They often wonder, what if Jonathan had been just a little older, or if they had noticed sooner? Could this have been avoided? What if the remote had been stored differently? Would he still be alive today? These painful questions remain with them. But by sharing Jonathan's story, they hope to spare other families from the same heartbreak. It was July 29, 1998, in Oldham, Greater Manchester, when 16-year-old Jonathan Capewell passed away unexpectedly at home. His death was later ruled as an accident caused by something no one could have predicted: deodorant. Jonathan was a typical teenager, active and healthy, but he was also very conscious of his hygiene. He wanted to smell good at all times, so he developed a habit of using deodorant excessively. After every shower, he would spray his entire body, sometimes using multiple brands at once. This became part of his daily routine, and he would often apply it in small, enclosed spaces like the bathroom. His father, Keith Capewell, noticed his son's frequent use of deodorant and even commented on it, wondering if he was using it excessively. However, no one realized the danger. The aerosol cans contained chemicals like propane and butane, which, in large amounts and without proper ventilation, could build up in the bloodstream over time. On the day of his passing, Jonathan followed his usual routine. But shortly after applying deodorant, he collapsed in his bedroom. His 17-year-old sister, Natalie, found him unconscious on the floor. Emergency services arrived quickly, but despite their efforts, Jonathan could not be saved. He was pronounced dead at the hospital. His parents were in shock. A post-mortem examination revealed the cause of death. Jonathan's blood contained 10 times the lethal level of butane and propane. The lack of ventilation in the small spaces where he applied deodorant had led to a buildup of toxic chemicals in his system, which caused a fatal heart attack. The coroner ruled his death as accidental, stating that Jonathan had unknowingly put himself at risk through his hygiene routine. His parents were devastated, struggling to comprehend how something as simple as wanting to smell good could have led to such a tragic outcome. Jonathan's case was the first of its kind in the United Kingdom. Unlike others who inhale chemicals intentionally, he had been using deodorant as part of his daily routine. His mother, Louise, became vocal about the need for clearer warnings on aerosol cans, criticizing companies for spending millions on advertising while neglecting to warn about the risks. Unfortunately, Jonathan's story was not the last. A decade later, in 2008, 12-year-old Daniel Hurley collapsed in his bathroom after spraying deodorant. He had a pre-existing heart condition that was triggered by exposure to the aerosol fumes, leading to a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. He had used Lynx, the same brand Jonathan favored. Despite these tragedies, the British Aerosol Manufacturers Association, or BAMA, claimed their research couldn't replicate the conditions that led to harm. They maintained that aerosol products had been used safely for decades and that warning labels were already in place. However, experts like environmental scientist Dr. Peter Dingle disagreed. He believed the existing warnings weren't enough and that people needed clearer guidance on how to use these products safely. Jonathan's family continues to push for better labeling and awareness. His younger brother, Nathan, now an adult, makes sure to use deodorant cautiously, always ensuring proper ventilation. Jonathan's story is a tragic example of how something as common as deodorant can become dangerous when used excessively in confined spaces. It's a reminder to be aware of how we use everyday products, because sometimes even routine habits can have unexpected consequences. It was December 2019 in Pitlochry, Scotland. Wallace Hunter, a 75-year-old grandfather, was on a weekend trip with his wife at the Pitlochry Hydro Hotel in Perthshire, Scotland. A retired precision engineer from Eaglesham, Renfrewshire, Wallace loved traveling and spending time with family. The getaway was supposed to be a relaxing break, but it ended in tragedy. On their last morning, Wallace went to take a shower while his wife packed their belongings. However, what should have been a routine task turned into a fatal accident. Wallace became trapped in a bathtub filled with dangerously hot water. The bath's mixer tap, which had been faulty for years, malfunctioned. The tap had a sensitive temperature control, and when the cold water stopped, the hot water continued running unchecked. The water reached extreme temperatures, and Wallace, unable to escape, suffered severe burns over 83% of his body. The first warning came when water from Wallace's bathroom started leaking into the room below. A guest reported the issue, prompting night porter Elena Cespedes to check. Initially, Wallace's wife assured staff everything was fine, but after a second call, she admitted her husband was trapped and in distress. She also mentioned that Wallace had dementia, making the situation even more urgent. Elena rushed to their room, hearing Wallace moaning in pain behind the bathroom door. However, the door was locked from the inside and opened outward, making it nearly impossible to break down. With no emergency release mechanism, staff tried to force entry using fire extinguishers and even a crowbar, but the door held firm. As the minutes passed, Wallace's condition worsened. His moans grew weaker. The rescue attempts continued for 45 minutes before Elena decided to call emergency services, despite Mrs. Hunter's initial hesitation. When firefighters finally arrived, it had been 90 minutes since Wallace first became trapped. Breaking through the door, rescuers found Wallace submerged in scalding water. The heat was so intense that firefighters had to wear protective gloves to remove him. Despite cardiopulmonary resuscitation efforts, Wallace was pronounced dead at 8:31 a.m. A post-mortem confirmed the cause of death was severe burns from the scalding water. His family, especially his wife, was devastated, not only by the loss, but by the horrific nature of his final moments. The pain of knowing he was trapped suffering while others desperately tried to reach him was unbearable for them. An investigation revealed serious safety issues. The mixer tap in Wallace's bathroom had been in poor condition for decades, with guests reporting temperature fluctuations that went unaddressed. The faulty tap allowed hot water to run when the cold water stopped, creating a dangerous situation. The bathroom door lacked an emergency release, making entry difficult and delaying Wallace's rescue. A different design could have saved his life. During the inquiry, Hotel General Manager Christopher Stanton admitted that the problems with the tap and the door had been known for years. Complaints had been ignored, and safety precautions that could have prevented the tragedy were never taken. Wallace's son, Keir, described his father's last moments as a nightmare. He called it a horror story, something his family would never recover from. The thought of his father trapped, suffering, and unable to escape was unbearable. The Hunter family took legal action, suing the hotel's previous operators for negligence. They claimed the hotel knowingly put elderly and vulnerable guests at risk by failing to fix the dangerous water system. Adding to their distress, they never received an apology or even a refund for their stay. Further investigation revealed that the company owning the Pitlochry Hydro Hotel at the time of Wallace's death went into liquidation in 2020. The new owners had not yet been involved in the inquiry, but Wallace's family hoped that the findings would lead to stricter safety measures in hotels to prevent another tragedy. Wallace Hunter's death could have been avoided. A faulty tap, a poorly designed door, and years of ignored complaints resulted in an unimaginable loss. His family continues to seek justice, not just for themselves, but to ensure no one else suffers the same fate. On March 13, 2024, 93-year-old Elizabeth van der Drift woke up in her sheltered housing in Regent's Park, North London, unaware that this day would take a tragic turn. Elizabeth had been living with dementia, a condition that made her forget small but important details, like when she last ate. Often she would search her home for food, unable to recall when she had her last meal. Elizabeth had lived a remarkable life. Born in the Netherlands in 1930, she survived the Dutch famine during World War II and later became a nurse, traveling through countries like Nigeria and Zambia. She was independent and fearless, traits admired by her daughter Marjolaine. Even as dementia took its toll, Elizabeth remained curious and strong-willed. But on this day, her illness would put her in unexpected danger. That morning, Elizabeth wandered into her kitchen looking for something to eat. In her search, she came across a pack of brightly colored laundry pods that had been left within reach. Their vibrant pink, orange, yellow, and green appearance made them look similar to sweets. Likely confused and hungry, Elizabeth mistook them for candy and bit into one. Immediately, she felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She struggled to breathe and became visibly distressed. Her body, already weakened by age and dementia, reacted severely to the concentrated chemicals inside the detergent. Realizing something was terribly wrong, an ambulance was called, and Elizabeth was rushed to the hospital. Despite medical efforts, her condition worsened over the next few days. On March 19th, 6 days after ingesting the detergent, Elizabeth passed away in the hospital. Doctors determined that she had developed aspiration pneumonia due to the toxic effects of the detergent, worsened by her pre-existing health conditions. An inquest led by Assistant Coroner Ian Potter revealed how a simple mistake had devastating consequences. He explained that Elizabeth's dementia made her vulnerable to misidentifying the laundry pods as food. The bright packaging, designed to be eye-catching, closely resembled a bag of sweets, making it easy for someone with cognitive impairments to mistake them for something edible. Potter also pointed out a serious issue. While safety warnings about these products had mostly focused on children, little attention had been given to the risks they posed for people with dementia. Current regulations aimed at preventing food-like packaging did not account for the needs of adults with cognitive impairments. A key concern was that the pods were easily accessible. While manufacturers included child-resistant packaging, there were no additional safeguards to prevent someone with dementia from opening them. Elizabeth's case raised urgent questions about whether enough precautions had been taken to protect vulnerable individuals. In response, Potter issued a Prevention of Future Deaths, or PFD, report, addressing the United Kingdom Cleaning Product Industry Association, the Office for Product Safety and Standards, and the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. The report urged these organizations to review product packaging and consider better safety measures to prevent similar tragedies. The coroner emphasized that while child safety regulations existed, they did not fully address the dangers for older adults with cognitive conditions. He warned that without changes, more individuals could unknowingly put themselves in harm's way. Elizabeth's daughter, Marja Lane, supported the coroner's recommendations, hoping her mother's case would bring awareness to the overlooked risks of household products. She believed that her mother's story should serve as a call for change, ensuring that companies reconsider how these products are designed and packaged. Elizabeth's passing was officially ruled an accident, but it sparked an important discussion about product safety and the need for stricter regulations. Her situation highlighted the risks faced by elderly individuals with dementia, a group often left out of product safety considerations. Had the packaging been different, had additional safeguards been in place, or had more awareness been raised about these risks, this tragedy might have been prevented. These are the questions that now drive the push for change, so that no other family has to experience the same loss. Though Elizabeth had lived an adventurous and independent life, her final moments reflected a vulnerability that could have been avoided. Now, her story serves as a reminder of the urgent need to rethink how everyday household products are designed, not just for the general public, but for those who may struggle to understand the dangers they pose. It was July 2, 2005, in Beswick, a district of Greater Manchester, England. The Wilson family home was a warm and loving place where 4-year-old Brandon Clausen lived with his mother, Angela, and his 2 older sisters, Melissa and Paige. That Saturday afternoon was quiet and peaceful. Angela was outside assembling a new garden bench while her daughters played in the street. Everything seemed normal until it wasn't. Brandon was an adventurous and curious child. He usually asked his mother for food when he was hungry, but on this day, he decided to make a sandwich by himself for the first time. The kitchen was briefly left open, allowing him to try something new. He climbed onto the counter and reached for a small paring knife from the kitchen block. The ingredients were already laid out: slices of bread, a tub of margarine, and a package of cooked meat. Everything suggested he had been carefully preparing his snack, just like he had seen his mother do many times before. But then something went terribly wrong. While reaching for an item on the counter, Brandon lost his balance. As he fell, The knife in his hand pierced his chest, causing a severe injury. He collapsed to the floor and cried out for his mother. Angela heard his scream and ran inside. What she saw was devastating. Brandon lay on the floor, blood spreading across his chest. His eyes rolled back, and his skin turned pale. In a panic, Angela picked him up and ran into the street, calling for help. Neighbors quickly gathered as they heard her cries. A passing police car stopped, and officers attempted to help. They performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation while waiting for paramedics. When medical responders arrived, they rushed Brandon to Manchester Royal Infirmary, where surgeons tried to save him, but his injury was too severe. Despite their efforts, Brandon did not survive. In the aftermath, shock and grief filled the air. Angela was devastated, struggling to accept that such a simple act, making a sandwich, had led to such a heartbreaking outcome. An inquest was launched to understand exactly what happened. Investigators examined the scene carefully. The knife had fallen near a tub of margarine, and all the ingredients were left on the counter, confirming that Brandon had been making a sandwich when the accident occurred. Forensic experts analyzed every detail and ruled out foul play. The evidence pointed to a tragic accident. Brandon had fallen while holding the knife, causing a fatal wound. There were no signs of neglect or wrongdoing. One detail stood out: a missing cupboard door, which Brandon may have used to climb onto the counter. This might have contributed to the fall. During the inquest, Angela spoke through tears about her son. She explained that this was the first time he had ever tried making food for himself. She never imagined such a simple moment of independence would lead to tragedy. She described him as a loving and playful child who always found ways to make people smile. At night, he would climb into her bed, telling her how much he loved her. Angela was not alone in her grief. Her two daughters and her mother, Angela White, stood by her side. Earlier that day, the family had gone shopping and bought Brandon a new water pistol. He had been excited to play with it, unaware that the day would take such a tragic turn. After a thorough investigation, the police officially ruled Brandon's passing as accidental. The coroner, Leonard Gorodkin, confirmed this, stating that no one was at fault. A post-mortem examination supported the findings, showing that the injury was consistent with an accidental fall. The Beswick community mourned Brandon's loss. Neighbors gathered outside the family's home, leaving flowers, toys, and handwritten notes. One card expressed sentiments of remembrance, describing Brandon as a sweet, loving little boy and wishing for the angels to take good care of him. Another neighbor wrote a poem in his memory, offering condolences to the grieving family. The tragedy of Brandon Clausen's passing was deeply felt by all who knew him. What started as an ordinary afternoon ended in an unimaginable loss, one that his family and community would never forget.